Good morning. We're live, and our meeting is about to start. Very timely indeed. It is 9:30 in the morning on this brisk morning of May 15th. You see our council body dressed up a little bit more casual, and it's because this body right here, all three of us are gonna go riding the bicycle with the city manager, without the city manager. And we welcome all of you here this morning. As you all know, we are in the third meeting of allocations. At this point in time, in our first meeting, we allocated grants for the contracted services of the city of Topeka. The second round of grants that were awarded yesterday were grants to the organizations that scored the highest scores that were not below an 80%. Now today we have an excess of $100,000 that we are going to be attempting to allocate and establish some policies for. It's a little bit more than 100. No?
It's 50.
53.
53, I'm sorry. But then we also have the emergency aid services.
Okay.
Together, it's 100.
So, thank you. So we have a little bit of, we have 75 on one side and we have 53 on another to be allocated to preventive and counseling services and to emergency aid grants that were below the scores of 70%. Of 80%, I'm sorry. So at this point in time, now the meeting has been called to order. The first item on the agenda is to approve the minutes of the last meeting, not May 14th, but the meeting prior to that. Councilwoman Hiller sent some amendments, and I don't know if everybody has been able to look at the amendments that Councilwoman Hiller sent.
I sent them to Amber, so if Amber didn't send them
No.
out,
Okay. So at
I
this,
sent them to Ginny and you, because I didn't know when.
okay. Well, at this point, would we just like to do an e-vote of the minutes, since we have not had
We
time?
apparently can't.
We cannot.
Did they get sent to you, but not to
I
Nathan?
did speak with the city
I haven't
attorney
seen 'em.
this morning with regards to the minutes.
Okay. Well, we can hold them, or, there were just two very simple.
The changes were simple. One of the changes was Councilwoman Hiller wanted to ensure that in the minutes it was stated that her no vote was because we were not sure of the
Because that
the
was not
process
yet
yet.
comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And
I
then,
remember that being said.
and then where it talked about, Ms. Wright presented a list of 3 funding allocations options. I wanted to change it just to say discussion ensued, and then to say the committee moved forward to use option 1. That was also on there, simply because the minutes as drafted said consensus, and we really didn't talk through that, but we did move forward, and because I had had some concerns and we'd had a fair amount of conversation, and we chose to have the minutes be short, which is fine. I was just more comfortable with that phrasing.
I'm okay with that.
Okay, well, with the amendments, do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Move to approve as amended.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second?
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed, same sign? Okay, minutes approved. Has anybody had a chance to take a look at the minutes of yesterday?
They even come out? They're not
No.
even out.
Okay, so then,
You might have.
yeah, I think I got them. No? Then I looked at these minutes. Okay. All right, so at this point in time, we're gonna go back to the regular routine that our meetings have had, in which, before we go further by looking at the grants, I think that there's some policy decisions that we have to make. There were several recommendations yesterday that were made with regards to grants and their scoring. And at this point, I would open it up to see if any of the members of the body have had time to sleep on this and think through the scoring that we have in front of us, and if there are any policy remarks that you would like to make. Just for reminder's sake, there was conversation yesterday about, at one point, if the grant was below the 70% mark, not funding any of those. The other comment that was thrown out is any grant that was below maybe the 70 then instead of the 80, that those grants would not be funded. We never got into a threshold. I know that there was some conversation with regards to, have we done enough of these already that we kind of see that the process is going, that we did understand that there could be some deviation in some scores that would not be adequate, but at the same time, understanding that a score lesser than 65, even in school, is a failing score. And is it adequate for us to establish funding for organizations that have such low score with regards to the priorities, which goes back to looking at the process and what we were intending to achieve with this. So that being said, I would just open it up for comments from the body with regards to how they would like to proceed or ideas that they have.
A general feedback comment is that as we've gone through this, I do think that the way you presented this at first, where we looked blind at just the whole collection and made these policy decisions and then move forward to look at the specifics, has worked well. So in terms of the way that we've got these sorted, it looks like on the emergency aid side, as long as we stay with the 75-25 split and don't change that, with what you just talked about, we don't have anybody that scored under 65, and there is enough money to go through pretty much the system that we've had to allocate in the remaining applicants for that side. I'm not sure what you wanted, I wasn't quite sure. I mean, if we keep on the basic system we've used before, I didn't go through and try and figure out what the cutoff would be on the others, so.
Okay, Mr. Schmidt, do you have any comments?
My only comment is I'm not sure how comfortable I feel with cutting off funding under 70% at this point, given that this is the first year of this process, and we've already discovered a lot of, not necessarily errors, but not being comfortable, not being familiar, not understanding various parts of the process, and that leads directly to scoring issues. So I wouldn't feel comfortable eliminating anybody as of yet, till we see the allocations, decide how we're going to do the allocations. If we get to the point where we're giving very little money to a few organizations, we may decide that a couple $1,000 isn't worth that, and we can better allocate that towards someone else. But
the only comment, just for conversation's sake, that I have with this is that if the system would have been extremely flawed, nobody would have been able to score as high as some of the grants did. So something must have been working. And I want to ensure that as we're looking at this, that as a body, we are fair, not allowing, again, and this is the hardest part, our heartstrings to be tied to this, but ensuring that if the system seems to work, for us not to discredit it because we're concerned of making a tough decision. Because we were very open with the fact that we were gonna be making some very extremely tough decisions when it came to this grant year, and we've been announcing this for a year now to all the organizations. This is gonna be a very, very difficult task for us. So with that in mind, yes, Mr. Schmidt?
I agree with that. I think the system has been very good. I don't think we've run into any major problems with the system. My issue is not with the system, it's with the familiarity with the system. I don't think it was anything. I think staff has done a fantastic job on this, but it is the first time through. I don't think we have major issues with the system. I think we have a few isolated issues with some applicants not quite understanding the system, or maybe some things that could be a little easier in the future. But this is the first time going through it, so I want to make it clear. I don't have a problem with how this system has been implemented and how staff has done it. My only issue is with the familiarity.
Okay. Any other comments?
I was doing a little math and get my calculator out like you guys did yesterday. We've talked back and forth about the issue of the $10,000 minimum grant that was passed. If we're on the prevent prevention and counseling grants carrying down just 53.9. We have 131,238 in requests, oh no, adjusted request, it's 180,000, adjusted by the rating is 131. And then, if they're weighted further per option one, if I'm reading this right, it goes to 76,000.
Mhm.
If we took the ones that end up, that are under 10,000 in the middle column, that end up under 5,000 in the
Mhm.
last column and take them out, takes 23,000 out and it's almost
Balances us.
exactly balanced. I'm just pointing that out. Now, some of those are higher. Of those, one was rated 79% and one 78, but the dollars involved end up dropping way down. So it's not exactly on ranking, it has to do
Mhm.
with the grant size as well. That's a 57, and that would actually leave the 60% one in, however. Because
Yeah,
that
and
one
I think,
requested a lot of money.
I
So-
think that would be very unfair then for the organizations that scored higher.
I just.
I-
with it.
We have close to $15,000 to a 60 and a 57%. Is there any carryover? Let me see we have 75,000.
Just for everybody in the audience, I know this can be frustrating at times that we're thinking out loud here. We're not actually allowed to meet outside of this with anybody else.
Mhm.
So everything this whole process has to be thought out on camera, live. Even if two of us meet, it would be a violation of COMA rules. So bear with us as we
Thank you for those
display
comments.
our display our thought processes or lack of thought processes.
Thank you, Mr. Schmidt.
I did bring some breakouts if you'd like to see
That would be
those.
really
Okay.
nice. With the updated numbers?
Yes.
Perfect, thank
Okay.
you.
I just wanted to hand out this tier one. We were off by $1 yesterday because of rounding.
$1?
I know. I was so disappointed, yes. So that's tier one, and I added 2 columns, so we would see that the difference between the CDBG and the general fund. So you
Wonderful.
can kind of tally where we're at on that from that
Okay, so this is the ones we did.
This is what we did
Okay.
at the last meeting, yes. And then this is another packet.
And these are
This is
today's.
Tier
tier
two.
2 today. So again, option 1 is similar to what we did yesterday, which was the allocation by ranking minus the shortage, which you can see leaves everybody with fairly low numbers. And then option 2 would be the fund the highest, it's just an option. And then option 3, I was just reaching with that one, doing 50% of the allocation ranking to see where we fit on that one, so.
Okay, help me. So this is not what we had yesterday. You've recalculated.
With the 53.
With the 53,
Okay.
291.
So that's how, this shows how allocating to everyone
Mhm.
on a pro rata would come out. I see.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you for this work, Cory.
Sure.
So, oh, this is this
Mhm.
option 2, which we decided we want to do, right? I mean,
Correct.
before- Okay, so don't look at that.
Option 2 being the cut.
Yeah, the cut,
50-50.
yeah.
Oh, wait a minute,
No,
option two is what?
Option two is funding the
Funding the
highest,
highest.
and, until we ran out of money.
And we said that we
Oh, I
did not
see.
wanna do that because there's several of them that have zero.
Corey, can you explain option 3 to me again here?
Sure. This was, they received an allocation by their ranking, and then what I did is half that amount. So they got 50% of their allocation of ranking. It was just a reach, it was just trying to get another option out here
Mhm.
so we can
This is what
spread
option
that
two
money.
was yesterday, right? That's why.
No, we didn't do 50%.
No, what, this is
Well, we-
what I suggested at one point.
Okay.
I
that we
showed
rejected.
brackets and I said, well, you know, the top scoring ones, we could try to, you know, fund at 100%. Then the ones that are scoring lower, we will go ahead and minimize a percentage of their request based on the performance of the grant. And I think that this is more or less,
This is just giving everybody,
mm-hmm,
Option three was, intended to fund more people and not have the lowest scoring not receive funding.
You see, and even at option one, I'm looking at a possible grant of $3,000 and a $5,000 grant, and it just really makes you wonder, when you are investing the hours that you're putting forth in writing a grant,
mm-hmm.
is the dollars, are the dollars that are being allocated funding the time that it took to write it?
Right.
Because we were talking about that $10,000 threshold, but when you start looking at these numbers, you start thinking,
So these would all end up being under 10,000.
correct.
It's a little cleaner in the second option.
Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts?
Torn a bit. I mean, we really put some thought into that standard that we sent to the council that they adopted, that we would
Mhm.
fund under 10. And some of these, I mean, we made an exception to that. We could go revisit that, of course, but, if we wanted to hold it hard and fast, we could fill those up to 10.
Mm-hmm, exactly,
chose-
because we would have the
um,
option to do that.
But we would,
Mhm.
if we chose, out of the emergency aid side
Mm-hmm,
or this side.
correct.
That's one string, pretty small
Mm-hmm,
allocations. And as a nonprofit director in the past, I know that every dollar is valuable, so it's very hard. We did have a reason for that.
mm-hmm.
So do I get the feeling that you guys are leaning towards option 2?
It's extremely difficult to say this, but I think so, because it goes back to the whole vetting process that we wanted to ensure that we had.
Well, and as you've said, and you watched me struggle with it the worst on the first day, if we made that decision on how we wanted to score and fund them, if we're
Mm-hmm.
gonna stick with that, we knew it might be difficult.
Well, looking at these allocations with option 1 or option 3, I don't want
Exactly.
or $843. I would be willing to reconsider my stance on option 2 and move in that direction. Now, we're still, I don't think these are going to be the final numbers, although they may be the final numbers for these organizations, but we're gonna have some money to move around, I think, at the end of this a little bit, but if we wanna start in that direction, I've been persuaded.
So do we have consensus to start looking at these grants with the option of option 2?
I think so, and if we want to stick with the 10,000 minimum, we could ask staff to scurry around with their calculators while we do that and pull enough over. We gave ourselves the 5% leeway between emergency aid and prevention and counseling.
Mm-hmm.
And the numbers would probably run to pull over enough before we go to the emergency side.
Well, let me see.
That's right, we got Nikki back here.
Yes, we do.
Corey's like, not me. We got the finance lady. I mean, if we want them to still be proportional based on their percentages, then we would adjust the whole string, not just the ones, probably. Or maybe we need too much money.
And that's what I'm trying to figure out here.
We might, I mean,
We
we might
did-
just have to pull up and
We
level to 10.
did by percentage, by rating, right?
Right,
So therefore, that means that there's only 2 organizations that were below 10.
but there were 2 in the first tier also.
Mm-hmm, that's what I'm talking about,
Oh,
to see from the beginning where we have to start. So that's 501, and then 400.
Well, I think if we're going to move money over, I think we would move it over to the tier 1. And just-
Exactly.
And just add that to our 305, 250, and then redo the allocation
We
by
would
percentage
need
rating.
1,901, 1,901 to make the 2 grants that are in tier 1 up to $10,000.
without adjusting the whole string, just pulling them up alone.
Exactly, just pulling them up. That, because nobody else then would need,
No, I mean, if we wanted to keep the percents, we'd have to pull the whole string up.
okay, that would be a lot of money.
It would be more than
It would be a lot of money.
1,901.
It would be a lot of money.
But again, that's a choice
Absolutely.
to make.
And just so that everybody, like Nathan said, I think that one of the things that has helped the process stay within the 2-hour boundary is that we have had some really tough discussions before we even start looking at the grants on the process, so that then once we start looking at the organizations, we're able to flow. So again, I just beg your indulgence for just a few minutes while we try to hash this out.
So what you're looking at is just pull up the base on tier 1, only on the 2 that are short, since they're in first tier, and then just adjust the numbers in the second tier.
I think that was one suggestion. My suggestion would be if we move money, if we have extra money from the other, and move money over there, we add it to the 305, 250 for the tier 1 grants, and we continue by allocation by rating. We may not have enough to pull everybody over 10,000, although it would probably be close. But I don't think we can logically justify
Well, the other thing,
bumping up a grant that received a 88 or 86% rating to 10,000 and not bumping up a grant that received
the
a
other thing that
98.
we can do is drop the ceiling to 8,000, and it will cover everything that we're talking about.
Well, we've got, if we go with the original parameters, we've got as much as $20,350 that we can shift over from emergency aid to prevention and counseling to do our whatever balancing we're gonna do.
And my suggestion is, because it was a policy decision, and what I'm
Mhm.
looking at, when I look at these, we're getting close to the 8,000 mark. See where I'm going? So if we drop our floor, because I think that none of us wanna go ahead and give an allocation of $1,000 to an organization, or give an allocation of $900. But let's say that we drop that ceiling, that floor, because in our case, this was our floor, of how much it was gonna be the minimum grant awarded. We wouldn't have to then adjust anything that we did yesterday, because if we drop our floor, instead of to be 10,000, we drop it to 8,000, even 7,500. That is still a nice grant. It's not where we would like to be right now, but like we said, this is the first time that we do the process. And if we drop that to 7,500, we don't have to adjust the grants that we allocated yesterday, and we would still be able to do a lot of the work that we wanted to do here.
We could probably leave it at 8. I mean, the issue
Leave it at
would
8?
be,
Mhm.
would be that the council did adopt that $10,000 minimum. So if we had chosen even with those two, we would have had to bring that to their attention and have them approve
Is that something that we could bring to council in the next meeting?
They'd probably be okay with it. I'm just pointing it out.
Mm-hmm.
I think if we defend it whenever we do that.
Mr. Schmidt, how do you feel about that option? Dropping the floor from 10 to 8?
Well, I think if we're going to, I mean, I would rather just say let's suspend the idea of 10,000 than to set a new floor to fit the numbers that we came up with. Because that's what we're doing. We're suspending the rule in anticipation of employing that rule in the future going forward, now that people are familiar with the process.
So you're
I would
suggesting
prefer
the
to-
floor to be,
I would suggest that there be no floor. We just suspend that rule for this year.
but then
And-
if we do that,
We could still choose how to make it.
Well, yeah,
Okay.
I'm not saying that we go, if we went with the option 2 funding on these with no floor,
Mhm.
I'm okay with that.
okay,
Instead of going with the option, I don't like the,
okay,
under $1,000 funding. But if we go with the option 2, there's going to be, the lowest funding would be 6,460, and that's what it'll be this year. In the future, we won't fund anything under 10,000.
okay. Councilwoman Hiller, how do you feel about that? Understanding that this is just our first year.
So we would go with this option 2 as
Correct,
displayed
correct.
and leave the first tier and
Mhm.
simply not propose to change the guidelines, just propose to the council that we waive that one for this year,
Correct.
Correct.
that we. And you're comfortable with that, breaking that rule? You've held our feet to the fire the best.
I have, and I think that yesterday, we were put in the position
Mhm.
of seeing what the scoring does.
Mhm.
And that's something that we could have further discussion on, but like I said yesterday, I'm flexible. What I really would not like to see is a grant, like we were talking about, going for $800 or $1,000. I think that would be a disservice to both the agency and, because I mean, what outcomes are we going to expect the organization to provide,
Exactly.
with that type of funding?
Mhm.
So at this point in time, if the team feels so inclined, I would be more than happy to rescind the $10,000 floor and like.
We can't, but we could, if our
but we could-
consensus
for our
is to do that.
consensus to do
that
that.
this is-
Recommend that we
And
suspend
then
it
bring
for a
that
year.
as a discussion item when
Right.
we address the council
Right,
as a whole body.
right. I'm okay with that.
Okay, so is there general consensus, unanimous consensus?
That has to be unanimous.
Exactly, has to be, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so that being said, at this point in time, we are looking at option 2 for the allocations. And that being said, Ms. Wright, I think we're ready to hear about applicant number 1 in this tier.
Okay. Do you want me to go through the application?
A point of order, real
Yes.
quickly. Given the decision that we just made, it'd be very painful to, but I think it would be helpful to all of us if the agencies that we just zeroed did go
Will
ahead and
go
go through
first?
this process. Well, not necessarily first, but, I just wanted to make sure they knew that whether we were gonna hear from them or not. Just, I think yes, I just wanted to make sure.
So your suggestion is that we inform the organizations that did
Oh, they
not
don't know
receive-
who they are?
No,
Oh, okay, never mind.
so, or.
Good
so
point.
Can we proceed with organization 1?
Sure. Here's the score sheets for you guys. Oh. Where's my tier 2 section? Oh, here it is. Where's this? I need this. Sorry. Okay. The first organization was, Hopkins Landing. They received a 15 out of 15 on city priorities, 10 out of 10 on scope of projects,
Okay.
0.
Can you hang on just a second?
Sure.
I've got notes and I've got to find them.
Okay.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay. 0 out of 5 on outcomes being clear, 5 out of 10 on duplication, 20 out of 20 on outcomes on prior grants, 10 out of 10 effective management, 10 out of 10 on client input, 3 out of 5 on org leadership, 4 out of 5 on past grant administration, 0 out of 5 on government partnerships, and 5 out of 5 on private partnerships for a total of 82.
Questions from the body?
So we started with the,
Happen.
with
Hopkins
Pappen's Landing. Okay.
On the outcomes clear item, was that just failure to answer the question, or?
Yeah, if you look on page 4 of the application, there's one output and really no outcomes.
Mhm.
Any other questions or comments, Ms. Hill?
I observed the same thing as well.
Okay. If there's no questions or comments, then the tentative allocation for this organization is 13,920. At this point, the committee has established that this is what we're gonna go with, so we're just announcing it so that everybody knows as we keep on going down the list. If there's no other questions or comments, we could go to organization 2.
Okay. The next one's the Breakthrough House Residential Program. They received a 15 out of 15 on city priorities, 10 out of 10 on scope of project, 5 out of 5 on outcomes being clear, 10 out of 10 on duplication, 10 out of 20 on outcomes on prior grants, 10 out of 10 effective management, 10 out of 10 client input, 3 out of 5 org leadership, 1 out of 5 past grant administration, 3 out of 5 government partnerships, and 5 out of 5 private partnerships, for a total of 82.
They had one point with regards to grant administration. Could you elaborate on this?
Sure.
What occurred?
I think that's a 92 instead of an 82. I'm sorry. Spelled it out. Did she add?
No,
Am I wrong? I'm sorry. I was listening.
Mm.
It sounds like the same
12,
score as yesterday.
13, 16.
I'm probably wrong. Sorry to just.
Well,
Like it out there.
I'm not sure it's
17, 18.
correct.
It is an 82.
17.
Is it? Okay.
Yep.
It's 10 of 20 on outcomes.
Oh, 10. I'm sorry. Okay. I'm sorry, guys.
I just want to reiterate on the government and private partnerships. The committee, even though new programs worked with particular agencies or not, we did not consider it if it was not in the application. So there were some people that clearly are working with government but did not indicate that in their application.
And my concern also was the past grant administration, I'm sorry.
Yes. Late reporting
Late
is
reporting.
on prior city grants.
Okay. Any other questions from the committee? Comments with regards to the application? Okay, seeing none. Breakthrough House Residential, tentative allocation of 16,810. Next organization.
Okay. Next one is CASA. 15 out of 15 on city priorities, 10 out of 10 on scope of project, 3 out of 5 on outcomes being clear, 10 out of 10 on duplication, 10 out of 20 on outcomes on prior grants, 10 out of 10 effective management, 5 out of 10 on client input, 1 out of 5 on org leadership, 5 out of 5 past grant administration, 5 out of 5 government partnerships, and 5 out of 5 on private partnerships for a total of 79.
Questions from the committee?
Is somebody here from CASA?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I saw the scores made sense in terms of observing what I saw in the outcomes discussion. There was a lot of discussion about training the volunteers, but not really much discussion about what was happening for the kids. And so even though the volunteers are, and this is Karen's opinion, but we're working through this, are important, they are an input. Training them and having them ready to go is just there to help the kids, so.
Any other comments from the committee, questions? Mr. Schmidt?
Nope.
Okay, that being said,
Excuse me.
tentative allocation for CASA, 7,900. Next organization, please.
The next one is Meals on Wheels. 15 out of 15 on city priorities, 10 out of 10 on scope of project, 5 out of 5 on outcomes being clear, 10 out of 10 on duplication, 0 out of 20 on outcomes prior grants, 10 out of 10 effective management, 10 out of 10 client input, 3 out of 5 on org leadership, 5 out of 5 past grant administration, 5 out of 5 government partnerships, and 5 out of 5 on private partnerships for a total of 78.
Any comments or questions with regards to this grant?
The outcomes on prior grants, 0.
Yes. No,
Can you
we
explain?
did bring those with us.
I would think that would be
Pretty big flag.
a demonstrable
Mm-hmm.
outcome program. And that's 20 points, which would have put them at the top of the list. Are you-
Yes.
This is what we submitted as our outcomes. Okay. So I can pass this around, but the top sheet here is what they submitted once their contract was created for their outcomes. The second sheet is what was in their actual application, and then the third one is what they reported on their outcomes.
Okay.
So I just made one
And
copy
it's
of
it's
this.
different than what
It
this
is.
says substantially? Okay.
Well, that's prior year's grant, so.
Mm-hmm. Since many of you were not here yesterday, if I may, while they read, this section we're gonna work on, the outcomes prior grants is 20 points. That's kind of a mixed bag of the goals that were set, many of which are outputs, as well as the description of outcomes and outcome successes. We may split that next year because we realized we'd had them kind of combined, and so we really looked at both. Staff did, and so we are as well. Staff's done a great job at, and they are going back and looking at prior year reports to compare those to what people said their prior year activity was, and then what people are saying they're bringing forward for future. So just an FYI for future. There really are some outcomes discussions in this one that had been put in in the prior year grants that didn't come forward, and descriptions here too. So.
This one is per quarter also. I don't-
Something like that, it would be 120.
30.
Something that happened on this one too was that they'd had a pretty big goal for that year, and then there were some staff changes and some things like that, and a program that they were gonna inaugurate that they didn't. And they did identify that, but they didn't tie it back for us just reading the grant to what that baseline was from prior years, so you could kind of tell how things really had gone the year that had occurred. You're just kind of out there, so.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Seeing none. Tentative allocation for Meals on Wheels, 8,201. Next organization.
The next one is Community Action Latino Family Development. 15 out of 15 on city priorities, 10 out of 10 on scope of project, 3 out of 5 on outcomes clear, 0 out of 10 on duplication, 15 out of 20 on outcomes on prior grants, 10 out of 10 effective management, 10 out of 10 client input, 5 out of 5 org leadership, 1 out of 5 past grant administration, and 3 out of 5 government partnerships, 5 out of 5 private partnerships.
Questions or comments with regard to this application?
Sorry.
Staff explain the outcomes and the duplication.
Sure.
That's cool.
The duplication of a 0 would be that they didn't answer the question.
They did say something about collaborating with Bell Central. I'm not defending
If
it,
you-
I was looking
yeah.
for it.
Sure,
I'm not
understand.
knowing what the score was, I was looking for it just to see.
If you look on page 5, question 5, it's the question, the duplication question is right there, and you can read that quickly if you see something different.
Not answered.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay. Any other questions with regards to this grant?
Well, and I asked about the outcomes too, that was scored down, just
Outcomes.
unclear.
Yeah. Again, we scored everybody that had outputs, only outputs, as a 3 out of 5.
Correct,
Okay.
thank you, thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
Past grant administration, is it just late reporting?
HESG, yes, late, extensions,
Extensions for the HESC.
prior extensions.
On different grants, not this one, did I?
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Homlish, would you like to approach the microphone?
Yeah, I just want to, thank you. The extension has occurred on a number of grants, I think, not just ours. And that generally relates to either the old ESG or the current HESG. And it also may occur in cases where the grant is CDBG based. which is what happens with us. We both get the HESG, homeless prevention, and we get CDBG. The contracts that we get for both of those grants often do not come to us until May or June,
For a grant year of,
January to December.
just checking.
So it happens primarily in the case of the HESG. In the case of youth and social services, generally, that grant for most of us, I think, is below what it actually costs. And so that gets spent fairly quickly. But the HESG money is directly related to service to clients, so that is money paid to utilities or to landlords,
So you have to have the client to do it.
and the money.
Mm-hmm. At the same time.
So it varies. I mean, Rochelle does a terrific job in sort of walking us through that period of time and so on. But if the grant year is January 1 through December 31st, and we got the contract in April, May, or June timeframe, then we would have to spend that money during anywhere from a 6 to 7 month period, and that depends upon the qualification of the applicant. So it may take us into January, or it may take us even longer in order to get the clients who are gonna fit that profile or fit the regulations of HESG, right? So to be
Deemed.
or what did you say? You can't repeat that on television twice, it's a tough call, and I think Corey recognizes it. I would not, as an applicant, expected that would have been a mark against our grade. And I know you guys have a tough time, and it's a difficult task and so on. But I do think there needs to be some clarification as to how that criteria is going to be applied, because I feel that our agency, and there are other agencies in the same situation, who received that HESG and youth and social service money late.
Okay.
So there has to be taken into consideration, what is the time frame for a reasonable expenditure of that money?
Okay, well,
In the case of HESG, this is a different year because there's all kinds of stuff going on and so on. But in a normal year, I think it just, we're gonna be late.
okay.
We're gonna be
Point taken. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Mr. Homlish. At this point in time, because this is a new process, again, I think this is one of the things that staff highlights on what the expectations are going to be. And I think that the points that Mr. Homlish has brought forth are points that are worthy of looking into when we evaluate the grants next year. Maybe even if it means just looking at these applications alone rather than all of the other city applications. But I think that is a point that is very well taken, and it will certainly be used into the policy forming for next year. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I concur with the situation. I just wanted to let you know that we did grade all applicants with that same exact criteria. So if you lost 3 points, then the other person lost 3 points as well.
I don't take it personal.
Thanks.
But it's a good point, because there have been other times when we have, as a city or as grantees, come up with a windfall that, who's gonna turn it down? But then if you're not ready to roll it out, it can take some time. So it's thanks for bringing that up. Because
Much
we've heard
appreciated.
HESG before on some of these, as you
Mhm.
reported to
Yes.
us. It has.
Okay, any other comments or questions? All right, that being said, community action, Latino family development, 6,460. Next grant.
Okay. Kansas Legal Service Employment Training. 10 out of 15 on city priorities, 3 out of 10 scope of project, 5 out of 5 outcomes being clear, 5 out of 10 on duplication, 0 out of 20 on outcomes, 10 out of 10 on effective management, 10 out of 10 client input, 3 out of 5 on org leadership, 5 out of 5 past grant administration, 5 out of 5 government partnerships, and 5 out of 5 on private partnerships, for a total of 61 out of 80. I will say that the 0 out of 20 on outcomes was not rated on this particular grant because we didn't have any prior grants.
Okay. Questions or comments for this grant? Ms. Heather?
Something, in this case, this is a new grant to us, so there are no outcomes, but it's actually an expansion on a program that has history, with pretty much the same clientele as well. So this is not so much a challenge for this one. I mean, it's working out, I suppose, but when we were setting up the criteria, we knew that some existing organizations would want to take on a new program that had no history, or we would have a new applicant that was doing something that had no history. But where they have history with the program, their outcomes were pretty well described, actually, I thought. Although,
Well, they were
yeah, you
not,
gave them 5
they
on
were
the-
not docked,
Right,
and they were rated on an 80 rather than a 100 scale
understood.
to make it fair to them.
And so it worked out that really the
Mhm.
question was much more procedural for us for future, because this is a program that they do have outcomes experience with.
The challenge is that then it would put the burden on the staff to then have to go back to the other programs and verify when they're doing this to make sure that
True.
the information on one grant is congruent
True.
with another.
Good point.
And I think that the hope
right.
here is to ensure that when they're looking at one document, they stay at one document
Good point.
to make it simplified. But thank you, your comments are very well taken. Any other comments or questions?
The 5-point reduction on city priorities.
Yes, looking at the city priorities, we did not, the committee as a whole, there's 5 of us, did not think that they met one of the categories for, city priorities for employment training.
Why is that?
Well, we have aging services, medical, youth services, food, clothing and utility, mental health, neighborhood, and language services. The committee as a whole didn't see employment training as a city priority based off of that information.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm,
Okay. Thank you.
Good job.
mm-hmm, very good job. Thank you very much. Anything else?
Scope of the project?
Relative to the amount of money requested, and population, the amount of people served, the committee felt that it was a small number of people. It's the nature of the program, I understand, but a small number of people for the amount of money that was being requested.
Okay. Well, and actually, let me look. Now, I guess we would be, it wasn't real clear whether the money from the city was the total cost of expanding that program. If they get substantially less, they might not do it, I suppose.
And I think that that also, again, falls back to the whole, how we structure the budget next year.
Well, I mean, if they choose to define that it's extra money within an existing program, what you see is that, well, I don't know exactly what they're doing. 'Cause it drops and then goes back up, kind of our money. Okay.
Any other questions or comments from the body? Okay. And this is the difficult point in which we say that here is where we've run out of money, and this grant is not funded. Next organization?
Topeka Youth Project, Youth Court, pardon me. Okay, Youth Council Court, whichever. 15 out of 15 on city priorities, 5 out of 10 scope of project, 5 out of 5 on outcomes, 10 out of 10 on duplication, 0 out of 20 on outcomes on prior grants, 10 out of 10 effective management, 10 out of 10 client input, 5 out of 5 org leadership, 4 out of 5 past grant administration, 5 out of 5 government partnerships, and 5 out of 5 on private partnerships.
Can you elaborate in regards to the outcomes
Sure.
of prior years?